Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of Crimes of the Future. My name is Daniel, and joining alongside me today is my fellow criminal, Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Hello. I thought you were gonna call me your fellow performance artist.
We can't. Yeah, I could have called you that, but I chose a darker path, and I'm like, you know what? He's a criminal. He's going to be a future criminal. So yes. It felt right. Yes. How are you doing though?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very good. It's been a long week. We've had so many things come out on the show. Looking forward to the next couple of months because it's going to be absolutely wild.
That's one of my favorite things about the summer months of the show. And I think every year now that we've done the show, the summer movie season feels like it's starting sooner and sooner each year now. And there's going to come a time where I feel like it's just going to be 12 months. You're basically already there. It's going to just be 12 solid months all the time of just giant movies and giant shows releasing. And, even if you look at June right now, it's like we have Stranger Things, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Miss Marvel, Jurassic Park, and just all these other movies, Top Gun, all overlapping with each other, all within the same time frame. It's a crazy time. It's amazing. It's fun, but it's also just like, oh my God, there's so much.
100%. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to that. And yeah, it's been super crazy.
It has been super crazy. And, if we look back on May, we've had a really amazing month of shows on the movie podcast, not just with our reviews, but also with the incredible special guests that we've been able to welcome on the show, including people like Sam Raimi and Michael Waldron and Mark McKinney and Dave Foley and Devin Nakota and Akiva Schaffer. Like, this has been one of the biggest months ever for the movie podcast. So on behalf of the whole team, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's listening right now. You are the reason why we're doing this and why we have the success and why we're able to get the opportunities that we are getting. Yes, we have a great show. I think we do a really good job, but it would be all for naught if it wasn't for you listening. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to say, as always, you can catch a brand new episode of the Movie Podcast every single Monday, and watch out throughout the week for our review episodes and all the latest movies and series. Make sure you follow us at the Movie Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd. And don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, join our Discord, and write into the show at hello@TheMoviePodcast.ca. You could check out our show notes for all of those links and more. Recently, we also just did a giveaway with our friends at Disney Studios Canada for Bob's Burgers. I want to say thank you to everyone who entered. We hope you had a great time at the screening. Shay was there as well, too. And speaking of Shay, he's not on this review, but come Monday, we will all be back together again with our mainline episodes of the show and then heading into a crazy summer movie season. So there's lots to look forward to. So thanks for sticking around. And yeah, go check out our Bob's Burgers review right now because Shay's also on that one. You'll be able to hear his voice if for some reason you're missing it. And there's lots to listen to on the feed as well, too. I don't know. Are you laughing, Anthony? Or because I just saw you just kind of give me a little bit of a smirk there.
No, I'm just smiling because it's just like, again, it's so much stuff that's coming out.
It's so much. I feel like I'm just going through like a laundry list of things here. And of course, there's our Obi-Wan Kenobi review that's out right now that you could go listen to, and lots more coming. So stay tuned. This is the best place to be if you want to be caught up on all the movies and shows coming out in the world, because it's the Movie Podcast. We have a good time here, and we're so glad that we're here. But today is all about Crimes of the Future. This film is written and directed by David Cronenberg. It also stars Viggo Mortensen, Seydoux, Kristen Stewart, and Scott Speedman. I know we said that this is a review, but I really want to kind of dive deep into this film, and I want to get under the skin, so to say, and pun intended there. There's a lot to talk about with this movie. There's a lot to deconstruct with this movie. And this film has also been a long time coming because I remember years ago hearing about David Cronenberg making this movie, and it was going to be originally called Painkillers. And then we never really saw of it. And when I was looking up the article from when that came out, that was like the early 2000s. That was like 2002. So this has been a film that has been a long time coming for him. Mm-hmm. And this was the film that he was originally meant to follow up Existence with, which was from like 1999. So it's really interesting to see that this film was obviously it got to be made, and here we are now, and it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and here we are getting to talk about it. And it comes out June 3rd. It's going to be opening in theaters everywhere. You could check it out then. But Anthony, let's talk about it. I want you to give us the synopsis of the film, and then we'll start giving our thoughts, our first reactions. We'll go into the normal show that we do. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun one.
Yeah. As the human species adapts to a synthetic environment, the body undergoes new transformations and mutations. With his partner Caprice, Saul Tenser, celebrity performance artist, publicly showcases the metamorphosis of his organs in avant-garde performances. Their mission to use Saul's notoriety to shed light on the next phase of human evolution.
Yeah, it's a very it's a great synopsis.
That's an interesting synopsis. It's super interesting.
It's like, okay, let's get into this. And again, this is a very different type of review for us because we don't normally review. Well, we haven't reviewed a film like this in a while, I would say.
No, like this is something that 100% you would find at TIFF or like at a film festival, which it premiered at the Cannes Film. Always pronounce it so wrong. Cannes.
Is it Cannes?
Cannes Film Festival.
Cannes Film Festival.
Cannes
right?
Film Festival, and it got like
people are going to argue with us either way.
Yeah. Standing ovation. Like it's one of those movies that is designed for a niche film lover, I would say, and even for a fan of David Cronenberg, this is a movie they probably will enjoy. But yeah, it's so different than what you normally see. It's this art piece of avant-garde itself, right?
This film kind of just drops you into the movie. Like you're kind of just dropped right into this world. And what's funny, when this trailer came out, people were like already predicting like, oh, like how many people are going to walk out of the theater when this premieres? And it kind of had that notoriety going into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It already had that feeling of people are going to like walk out upset and offended or like clutching their pearls type of thing. And
this is going to be banned type of thing.
It's going to be banned. But what's really interesting with this film is that, yeah, it definitely has some really uncomfortable moments in it. But I also thought it was going to be more uncomfortable than it was. You know, it's definitely strange and it's out there. But I was preparing myself. You know, when you heard like you always hear the stories like, oh, people are going to be preparing to walk out and to boo it. You're always prepared for the worst. So I think because I was preparing for the worst going into it, I was just like, oh, that was actually strangely like kind of endearing at moments. But also, yeah, there's some weird surgery and body gore going on, which David Cronenberg is obviously known for. Yeah,
it's Cronenberg's body horror, but not to the extremes of what we've seen from him in the past. This is more tapered down. So he's trying to still tell the story, but not have his body horror, we'll say, take over the film. And the whole movie is essentially the body horror art piece. Because Saul Tenser, who's played by Viggo Mortensen, is a performance artist who grows organs in his body, or we'll say he has a disease where he continuously grows organs in his body, and these organs do nothing for him. They're actually killing him. So him and Caprice, played by Léa Seydoux, they remove these organs as like this art exhibit, and all these people would come and they'll view it, and she actually tattoos his organs and then removes them in real time, which is such an interesting concept to a movie. Like when you hear that, you're like, what the fuck is this? What am I watching, right? But it's the way the way it was presented to us, it was like, that's interesting. It's not weird because we've seen art performances before and they are very out there, and it could be, very big and small, but this is to the extreme. But they live in a different world too. This world that they live in is this is, I think one of the lines in the movie is, surgery is the new sex.
Right.
So it's a different film. It's a super different film.
It's a different film for sure. And in this world as well too, takes place in the future where the human body has evolved now that humans don't feel pain.
Yep.
So having surgery is like the only way that they could really, I guess, feel that rush, and then you have these characters performing surgeries on one another, and it's just so interesting to see. In this film, like I said, like earlier, this is supposed to be like Cronenberg's next film after Existence. So you see a lot of just visual, the visual language of this film kind of feels very similar to that, and even like the art direction in this film and some of the props that are like, oh, that looks like it could come from Existence. it's just interesting seeing this, and when we were kind of doing some research more into like, where did David Cronenberg come up with this? And when he was at U of T, he had a fellow, like a student that he was at school with, that wrote a story about somebody, like a performance artist who did surgery as a performance, and he cut off his own hand. And he's like, yeah, like I was so shocked and impressed by that. And I guess it turned into this movie. And at that point, this movie was going to be called Painkillers. And it's interesting now that, it has this title of Crimes of the Future, which was also a film that Cronenberg did in the 70s. And he's like, I really like that title, so I'm just going to kind of steal it for this film. Right. But yeah, you're dropped into this world. I think the performances by Viggo and Seydoux are great. I think they have really great chemistry with one another, and I think that's where I was so weirdly, like, I was just like kind of charmed, and I was like, oh, this is very endearing. This is a really interesting relationship between these two artists, these performance artists, but also there is an underlying love connection with them. And then you have Kristen Stewart, who's there, who's very eccentric in this movie, and it's cool seeing her take on a role, especially after Spencer, that she's kind of doing a different voice than we're used to seeing her, and she's being a little bit more just like, yeah, I don't know, like, dude, like that's kind of how she talks in this movie.
She's very neurotic in her
and sure. and it's fun seeing her that because she's such a great actress, and you see that shine through in this movie. And then when you see the subject matter of this movie, it's all the more strange that is like, this is what's kind of happening in this movie. But what I really liked about this movie was the world building. I liked that we are put into this world that, yes, there's a lot of exposition going on. Yes, because it's establishing the world that we're in. But I kind of liked, this is the world that we're in right now, and it's the future, and it's just weird and gross looking, but also it's not too different from the world that we're living in now. But it reminds me of a 90s film. Like, this reminds me, like, this could have easily been a Cronenberg film that came out in the 90s, because it has that feel to it.
It does. It feels like something I would have watched on Showcase as a kid, like, oh, this is like, when I think my very first Cronenberg film growing up was Crash, and that felt like this. Like, it's just like this erotic but provocative, taboo environment that we're in, and we just I don't know how to like comprehend it, but I'm so curious to understand it and trying to like, where does this imagination come from? There's also a lot of like social commentary on the fact. Of course, like, there's a lot of things regarding the environment that's in this movie. There's a lot of things that are related to surgery, and even the world that we live in we're always transforming, putting plastics in our bodies, for instance, and just trying to be beautiful. But there is the crime itself, right? Location. I felt like one thing that I didn't like about this movie was the location. It just felt like everything took place on one city block. It didn't feel grand in the sense that they were moving from a building to an underground, we'll say, art exhibit to somewhere else. Like, they don't really show that. They show Viggo's character moving around the city, but there's no name to the city. There's nothing really happening around it other than people just literally cutting themselves in the middle of the square. But there's not a lot happening in the city. I think that's kind of like a big factor for me in this world building. Where does this take place? What year? Who's in charge? What's happened? Like, what's happening?
You want to know more, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot more, and again, there's some really dark themes, and like, this is also one of those type of movies. And I think back to our review of Duel, which we did a few weeks ago, where this is also a very specific film that it's not going to be a film that you recommend to everybody. Right. No. I think you go into this film, especially if you're a fan of David Cronenberg, you got to know what you're expecting when you're going into a David Cronenberg film. You're expecting that, or even if you look at the last 20 years of his films, where his films of the last 20 years, we really haven't seen a lot of body gore that we've gotten like we did obviously in his films of the 80s and the 90s, right? But I look at films like Easter Promises or History of Violence or Dangerous Method. Those are very different films, or Cosmopolis or Maps of the Stars, compared to Crimes of the Future, which feels more like that classic David Cronenberg body gore, that body violence that we would see, right?
Feel
that dystopia, that feeling of just like helplessness, and I think that's what he does so well. And it's amazing to see that, after all this time, he's a Canadian legend, obviously, that he's turning 80 next year, and he's still just creating films that I think will be remembered and are just all consistently great within his genre, right? Which is really cool. But yeah, this film is, after watching it this week with you, Anthony, like, it's just been on my mind a lot, just trying to like deconstruct it, because there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of very uncomfortable moments in the movie, obviously, because there's body gore and there's cutting yourselves and surgery and stuff like that. But I'm just more processing of, okay, what does this all mean? And this is one of those films that I'm really excited to see, people write essays or make video essays on,
100%,
go into forums or the Reddit threads afterwards and just see people discuss it. Because like I said at the top of this review, this really isn't a review. This is just more us. This is therapy for us right now afterwards.
Exactly. Like
this is us talking about it.
This is a movie that a lot of people will surgically, dissect. And that's the funny thing. I don't know if that's on purpose, but yeah, a lot of film students will watch this. A lot of like filmmakers will watch this. This is really designed for that world. It's also designed for the fans of Cronenberg. I don't see, someone who loves Marvel films going to watch this. This is not meant for everyone. It's a general audience, higher take of filmmaking, I would say. It's like an art house film, right? It is like an art house film. Yeah. But it's very curious art house film, because you come out of it thinking, man, it's a lot of like watching. You're just watching things happen, and you're curious to see where it goes. And then you're trying to understand the underlining message behind everything else. Right.
I will say, if we are to critique this film, which we have here and there in this review, I will say that the ending point of this movie just felt a little incomplete for me.
Yeah.
I think where this movie ends, well, you're kind of thrown into this world, which is great. But where this movie ends, I feel like this movie needed another 20 minutes or so to kind of establish what was happening and to give it a clearer ending. Just because I felt like it just felt very abrupt. Where we ended, I'm like, oh, we're just going to end here, okay? But it felt like it was building towards something else, and I think that's where it left me a little more puzzled. Where I was like, oh, this feels like it's just ending too quickly, and we needed to wrap this up a little bit better than what we got in the film.
I totally agree. Like, there's a lot of questions that are not answered, and even right to the end, you're just like, oh, this is the end. There's so many things that you haven't completed yet, and you're just telling the story, and it just abruptly ends. Right. I think that's just the type of filmmaking he makes too, right? It's just, there's really I'm not a big Cronenberg fan, so I've seen like his most modern films, right? But like a lot of his endings are very like abrupt and they just happen. And that's how I felt with this film. So yes, you get the highs of a David Cronenberg movie in the body horror and his past, we'll say, techniques that he used in the past, but without reaching like that crazy level that we so look forward to from a film of his. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. And, it's interesting, too. This is his fourth collaboration with Viggo Mortensen as well, too. You have A History of Violence. You have Eastern Promises. It's true. A Dangerous Method, and now Crimes of the Future. So I'm going to be really interested to see if they work together again. And I think having Kristen Stewart and Seydoux in this film as well too, we're coming off of the years that they've just had in the films that because they had huge years in 2020, like in 2020 and 2021 with the films that they had coming out. So I think he's just working with the right people, and I hopefully will have more movies coming from him, because it's never a bad thing to have a David Cronenberg film in the world. Before we get to our final recommendations, I just want to recommend, definitely, if you are new to the world of David Cronenberg and if you're not familiar with his work, definitely watch The Fly. Definitely check out The Dead Zone, which is one of my favorites. History of Violence, Eastern Promises. Any others that you want to add to that list, Anthony? Crash.
I know a lot of people talk about Videodrome.
Yeah, Videodrome is another great one.
And you said Dead Zone.
Dead Zone as well too.
Yeah.
A lot of great films you could watch. Even Existence. If you're planning on watching Crimes of the Future, maybe check out Existence before it, because
it's very unique,
very similar.
Very different movie making that you might not be used to, and I think it's good to open your eyes and like find these films, because Cronenberg is such a, especially for Canadians, he's born in Toronto, and he's a huge part of filmmaking in Canada, and he just brought that feel to the rest of the world, and they embraced it. So I think it's important for us to watch his work and observe it and understand it.
It's really interesting too when you see when you see his filmography and the actors that he's worked with. He is really one of the biggest directors working today. Even though I don't think he considers himself to be, because he always jokes back when I used to make the studio movies, that was a different time, but people want to work with him. And I think when you see his filmography and you watch, you're going to understand why they want to, because he really is a very special voice. And then he also has his son who's out in the world directing movies as well too. So Brandon Cronenberg, who he directed Antiviral, and he did Possessor, which came out 2 years ago as well too. So that was such a Cronenberg family movie in a sense. Yeah. That's their home videos growing up.
This unique tale that you never would have imagined. And again, it involves all the Cronenbergisms. I don't know if that's, again, I'm trying to make a word.
Cronenberg. Yeah.
And it's cool. It's cool to see his son take on that mantle as well, because I guess he really connected with his father's work. So he wants to continue that world.
Let's get to our final recommendations for Crimes of the Future. Anthony, I'm going to get you to start us off.
If you're a fan of David Cronenberg, I think this is a movie that you're going to want to see and enjoy, however you want to see it. If you want to go to the theater to watch it, or if you want to wait, this is definitely a movie that you're going to go watch. If you're not a fan, I think it's best to start off with and you're really interested in getting into his work, I think it's best to start off with his work and kind of watch older movies of his, and then dive into this movie. I'm not going to say it's a skip it. I would say it's to add to the queue for sure.
Right.
Because it is a curious film. And again, as someone who's not the biggest fan of Cronenberg, but understands his filmmaking, I respect it, and I went into it with an open mind, and I somewhat enjoyed it. I was curious from it, but again, I was left with a lot of questions and a lot of that's a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to echo this exact same thing as you. I think if you are a fan of David Cronenberg, go watch this movie. I think this will be right up your alley. But if you are looking to get into his work, this is going to be an interesting one to jump off from. So I would definitely say check out his filmography. Go through the films that we listed early in our review. Check those out and then go into this film, because I think you'll get a better appreciation of the work that he's doing. Or like Anthony said, add this to your queue to check out when it does eventually come to at home to watch, because there's still this is such an interesting movie, and I want more takes. I want more essays and more thoughts on this film, so we could kind of deconstruct it. We're still processing it. We watched it a day or two ago now, so we wanted to take some extra time to really process it and think about it. So yeah, David Cronenberg fans, you'll be happy with this one. For general audiences, maybe start with his other work and then build your way up to this one.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening to the movie podcast review of Crimes of the Future. The film is going to be releasing on June 3rd in theaters. And I want to say thank you to our friends at Sphere Films for inviting us to watch this film. As always, you can catch a brand new episode of the Movie Podcast every single Monday. We will be back with a brand new episode this Monday, covering everything from Star Wars Celebration and all the news that we've missed out on in the last couple weeks of not doing the show. Make sure you follow us at the Movie Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd, and don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and join our Discord. You can also write into the show at hello@TheMoviePodcast.ca. Check out our show notes for all of those links and more. That was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.